Reddit relationship advice. Update. My fiancé was caught cheating the day before our wedding. Hey, everyone. I am back with an update about my fiancé cheating on me the day before our wedding. As you know, she was cheating on me with an old boyfriend who has since passed away from a drug overdose. I accompanied her to the funeral. I know I shouldn't have, but I thought it was just the right thing to do. By no means. I plan on getting back with her, but I just figured I was helping someone in need. After I attended the funeral with her, we sort of went our separate ways. I didn't talk to her at all for about 3 weeks after the funeral. While I was at work one day, I get a text from Margaret asking, "Can we meet for dinner?" Her treat. I said, "Margaret, I have some work to do later. I don't think it's a good idea." She begs and pleads. I said, "Okay, I will text you later." At this point, I am perplexed as to why she wants to meet so badly. I think she is going to try and get back with me. Later that night, when we meet at a restaurant for dinner, Margaret starts crying over her food. Then, out of nowhere, she blurts out, "I love you. And I miss you." She goes on saying how sorry she was for what she did and how she hurt me. I told her, "Why are you asking me? I can't. I am still furious at what you did." I also told her, I can't trust her. It will never be like it was. She then asked, what could she do to regain my trust? I simply told her nothing, because I am over you. She then put her head down and started crying a little. Again, I simply told her that you broke my trust and the timing, Margaret, the timing. I had no idea she was going to take it this hard. I then asked her, what would she do if she were in my shoes? I would forgive you. She said, without hesitation. I said, Margaret is not that easy for me. As the night goes on, she is still trying to convince me to give her another chance, despite me telling her no. Margaret then tells me she would do anything to regain my trust and that she is sorry for what happened. I'm not sure how to feel about all of this. What is her motivation to try and get back with me? This has been a lot to process, and it's hard because part of me still cares for her. But at the same time, if I give her another chance, there is a strong chance that she will cheat again. I am not sure how to feel. I don't know if I should just let her go or give her the opportunity of proving herself. We wrap up our dinner date. I thanked her for dinner. She comes over to me and gives me a hug and walks away with tears. After the dinner date, a lot is going through my mind. The next day I call my dad and ask him, can we meet for lunch? He was surprised at first, but he said, sure, let's have lunch. So, as lunchtime comes around, I meet my dad at a restaurant nearby. He asked me, is everything okay? I said yes. I then tell him that Margaret and I met for dinner last night. He said, why does she want to meet you for dinner? I said, I don't know, but she wants me to give her another chance. I asked my dad, what would he do? He said, do you still love her? I told him that no matter what we have been through in the past and how much she hurt me, there was a part of me that loved her. He asked, do you want to give her another chance to prove herself or just let her go? He also added, you don't want to spend your life wondering about what if. My dad was right. I don't want to spend the rest of my life thinking, what if? I thank my dad for having lunch with me. Then I went back to work. As I finished up my workday, I drive home, and when I pull up, Margaret is at my door. I am thinking to myself, what is she doing here? I asked Margaret, why are you here? She says, I can't give up. Please give me another chance. I said, Margaret, I can't. It would not be in my best interest to give you another chance. She says, why? I say to her, you know why. We just went over this last night at dinner. As I am talking to her, I unlocked the door to my house and walk in. Margaret is right behind me, still pleading. We get into the living room and then she tells me she still loves me and just can't give up so easily. She again asked me, what can she do to regain my trust? I finally yelled at her and tell her, you can't. You will never be able to regain my trust. At that point, she went silent, dropped her head, and started crying. She walks out and leaves. After that, I didn't hear from Margaret for 2 weeks. I figured she got the message when I yelled at her. I was wrong. I get home from work one day. There is a knock at my door. I asked, "Who is it?" The voice on the other side of the door, it's Margaret. "Please, can we talk?" She says. I open the door. Margaret is on her knees with their hands interlaced, like she is praying. I said, "What are you doing? Get up. Why are you here?" She says to me, "Please consider giving me another chance." I said, "Margaret, why do you keep asking?" She says, "I love you and don't want to miss the opportunity to have a great future together. I know what I did was wrong, but please give me the opportunity to prove to you that you can trust me." I looked at her like she was crazy. I said, "Margaret, you killed that chance by cheating. Let me say this again. I am not getting back together with you. 1, you need to stop coming to my home. 2, I have made my mind up. There is nothing you can say or do to make me change my mind." She then bows her head, then looks up again and said, "That's it?" I said, "Yes, that's it." She then turns and walks away, totally dejected. After that, I never saw Margaret again. The last I heard, she was still living at her parents' and even dating some guy that a couple of people said he is a bum. One day I am at work. I get a text from Margaret saying she misses me and still loves me, even though I don't want to be with her. I simply read it and deleted it. A couple more days go by and a friend of mine is having a party and invites me. I go with my friends and I see Margaret there. She comes up to me and says she wants to talk, but I ignore her completely. Later that night on the way home from the party, a few of us were driving back when we saw Margaret's car parked at an empty mall parking lot. I said, "Hey, that's Margaret's car." So we drive up. And as we get closer, we all witnessed her having sex with some guy. We surprised them and Margaret spots me looking at her. I just shook my head and realized at that moment I made the right decision by not letting her back into my life. I looked at her and smiled and gave her a thumbs up. Needless to say, after seeing Margaret with that guy was definitely closure for me. I had already made my mind up that I was not getting back together with her. But after that, my decision was solidified. Word had got out from some of my friends on what we saw, but that was the extent of it. Weeks go by, and some of our mutual friends tell me they haven't seen or heard from Margaret since then. One day, I get a call from Margaret's mom saying that Margaret is moving out of state with her new boyfriend. I was surprised at the call, but her mom wanted to see how I was since all of the cheating came out. She told me she thought what her daughter did was horrible and she wished me the best. We talked for a few more minutes and then hang up. My workday continues. Then suddenly, Margaret walks into my office. I said, "What are you doing here?" She says she wanted to drop by and see me one last time. And she was in the area. She said, "I wanted to drop by and give you this letter." She puts the letter on my desk and walks out. After she leaves, I am sitting there surprised. She is still going through all of this trouble, and she has a new boyfriend. I pick up the letter and just stare at it. I am debating whether I should open it or not. What will it accomplish by me reading it? Probably nothing. So, I reached over my desk and put the letter in the shredder. I figured there's nothing for me to read or to consider. Margaret is past tense as far as I am concerned. I have the closure I need to move forward and not look back. I am proud of myself for sticking to my decision. As you can see, I am in a much better place now. It is so nice to be able to wake up, not wondering if she would cheat on me again or what new lies she has come up with this time. I don't have to worry about what if. I am free. I can move on with my life without any guilt that I made the right decision, especially thanks to my dad for giving me sound advice. This concludes this Reddit relationship.
"You're lucky, Kelly, because you're beautiful," admiringly said Zoe. "All the guys look at you only, and Marlon has been in love with you for a long time." Kelly was in complete agreement with her friend. She stood in front of the mirror and admired her beauty. A well-shaped figure, golden curls and wide-open blue eyes. No one could remain indifferent next to such a beauty. The girl smirked, realizing that the simple-looking Zoe would never be able to compete with her. Kelly turned to her friend, coquettishly twirling a curl around her finger. "Oh, Zoe, don't exaggerate. Marlon is not my type, and he and I are only friends. You can have him for yourself," she snorted and laughed. But Zoe knew that she could not get Marlon so easily, especially since he secretly dreamed of Kelly, even though she did not consider him as her boyfriend and communicated with him only as a friend. All Zoe could do was to keep sighing in silence for him. After school, she went to study in the same city as Marlon, while Kelly went to study in another place, and she saw Marlon only on vacations. At the new city, Kelly got plenty of admirers, but the girl immediately singled out one of them. Benjamin was the son of one of the most influential businessmen in the city. His father fully provided for his son, who spent his father's money on expensive restaurants, gifts for Kelly, and travel. Benjamin rented them an apartment, and Kelly was happy to have such a well-off boyfriend. She was sure that Benjamin was her ticket to a happy and prosperous life. And when the guy finally proposed to her, she immediately said yes. To be sure, at first Benjamin's parents were not pleased with their future daughter-in-law from the village, but the girl used all her charm and cunning to please them. Kelly agreed with them in all things, made herself love what they loved, and even affectionately called Benjamin as his mother called him. So it wasn't long before Kelly became the most desirable daughter-in-law in the world to Benjamin's parents. So what if she is a country girl? The most important is that she loves our boy, admired the future in-laws. Soon there was a magnificent wedding. Zoe and Marlon were also invited, and the girl could not hide her joy. She understood that Marlon would now forget about Kelly, and she would have a chance to win his heart. When she caught the bride's bouquet, she had full confidence that soon she would have a wedding too. And indeed, after a while, Zoe and Marlon began dating. At the graduation year, Marlon proposed to Zoe. The girl agreed with pleasure, and the young couple began to prepare for their wedding, which they planned to play in their native village immediately after graduation. They invited everyone they knew to the party, and of course, first of all, they invited their favorite friend Kelly. Kelly arrived at the wedding a few days in advance. She was dressed up in expensive brand-name clothes, and her sparking convertible literally screamed of her wealth. Kelly jumped out of the car and, staggering on high heels, hurried towards her smiling friends. "Marlon, Zoe," she shouted joyfully, but then suddenly twisted her leg and collapsed right into Marlon's arms. "Oh, it really hurts," cried Kelly. She tried to stand on her hurt leg, but immediately cried out in pain. "Zoe, I'll take Kelly to her house, and then I'll be back," said Marlon to his future wife, easily picking up their friend in his arms. Zoe even felt proud of her fiancé at that moment, watching as a kind and strong Marlon rushed to help the poor girl. She offered to take Kelly to the medical office, but she protested and assured them that she would be much better at home. Zoe didn't argue, especially since she still had a lot of pre-wedding worries to deal with. Marlon was carrying Kelly to her house, while she snuggled up to him and dug her nose into his neck, feeling wild joy that her cunning plan had succeeded. Kelly had planned ahead both her fall in high heels and her painful trauma. And all this was because she had learned about Marlon and Zoe's wedding and felt a burning jealousy. She felt so bad that she could hardly eat or drink. In her mind, she could not understand how Marlon, who had been her faithful admirer for many years, could fall in love with such an ordinary girl as Zoe. Kelly decided to win back Marlon by all means, and it did not bother her at all that she was married herself. When Marlon brought Kelly home, he bandaged her leg and she suddenly offered him a little drink. After a glass of wine, Kelly started to cry. With tears in her eyes, she confessed her love for Marlon and told him that she did not want to lose him. "Kelly, wait, but you had pushed me away when you married your Benjamin. With Benjamin, I am provided for all my life and I am not going to divorce him, but I have always loved only you, and I won't give you up to anyone else. You love me too. Won't you admit it?" "You are right, I love you," confessed Marlon, and it suddenly dawned on him. "So, are you offering to become lovers?" Kelly only laughed in response, and pulling him to her, passionately kissed him. Marlon did not come home until the evening, and, To Zoe's surprised questions, he lied that a friend had caught him and asked him to help change the oil in the car. Zoe's heart ached and her imagination immediately drew an ugly picture. But she tried to push away sad thoughts. She knew that Kelly was happily married, and as her best friend, she was incapable of meanness. A couple of days later, Marlon and Zoe's wedding took place. The young people accepted congratulations, smiled, but it seemed to Zoe that her husband was somewhat aloof. While she chatted with the guests, he did not even notice how her young spouse had disappeared somewhere. She went outside and looked around, but Marlon was nowhere to be found. Suddenly, she noticed Kelly's shiny car wobbling strangely, and bitter suspicions arose in her mind. She approached the car, but the two people inside were so engrossed in each other that they didn't notice anything. "Your silly cow didn't even notice you and me leaving," cheered Kelly. "Yes, my dear," laughed Marlon, and there was a sound of passion-filled romp. Zoe's first wish was to take a huge stone and throw it at the window of Kelly's brand-new car, to shower the shameless lovers with 1,000 painful shards. But instead she covered her face with her hands and ran. After a dozen steps she stumbled and fell, and remained lying in the grass, shuddering with inconsolable sobs. "Zoe, don't cry. He's not worthy of you," came a voice nearby, and someone's hands gently lifted her from the ground. "Hugo?" Zoe recognized a guy from her school. "And how do you know why I'm crying?" "What a secret. Kelly was a rat at school and still is. Not for nothing did I always put frogs in her school bag," laughed the man merrily. "So it was you," smiled Zoe through her tears. Hugo nodded proudly. Hugo was a year younger than Zoe and Kelly and was a known bully at school. "Do you want to make fun of them now?" winked Hugo. "I do," resolutely nodded Zoe, who suddenly felt calm and hopeful beside him, and she completely lost the desire to cry. Hugo immediately jumped on his scooter and, raising a cloud of dust, disappeared into the darkness. Zoe smiled and thought that Hugo was probably still the same prankster he had been in his school days. 10 minutes later, the guy returned, sitting behind the wheel of a huge truck filled to the top with fresh manure. The smell was such that Zoe covered her nose with her hands, and Hugo, pulling up beside her for a second, shouted, "Now get your camera ready. You're going to shoot for history." Hugo slowly drove the truck up to the fancy convertible, just as Zoe's unfaithful husband and Kelly, having enjoyed each other, decided to head back to the wedding. They were just getting out of the car when, first class, according to Hugo, cow manure fell on their heads. The unbearable smell spread around, and even the guests came out to see what was going on. Kelly was hysterical, trying to wipe the brown mud from her expensive suit, but it only penetrated deeper into the thin fabric. Marlon looked no better, but stood silent, and only Zoe was bursting out laughing, filming the whole scene on her smartphone. "This is for you, my dear lovers, from the silly cow," laughed Zoe. "Ooh, you wretch. You don't know who you're messing with. I'll sue you," squealed Kelly, wiping the muck from her golden curls. "I know exactly who you are, and I'll send your husband a video. He should know too," said Zoe cheerfully. "Hugo, that was the best revenge ever," she shouted to the guy, sending him an air kiss. Hugo laughed and, promising to help if she still needed it, got into the truck and drove off into the darkness. Zoe, meanwhile, went into the cafe where the celebration was taking place and, tossing her wedding ring on the floor, said loudly, "That's it. The wedding is over, dear guests. Now we celebrate the divorce." Zoe divorced Marlon. Benjamin, upon learning of the cheating, kicked Kelly out of the house. The girl got absolutely nothing during the divorce, as she had violated one of the main points of the marriage contract. And Marlon turned out to be too poor for Kelly. She considered him only as a lover. Zoe began to date Hugo, but so far she only looked closely at "My girlfriend 23 and I 24 had been together for 3 years. We got along splendidly and our life was just fun. We were able to travel and do fun things because we worked and had money left over after bills. It probably helped that we got a discount on rent from my uncle, our landlord. For my girlfriend's 23rd birthday, I decided to take her to an artist concert. For this story, I'm going to call him AP. She was always in love with AP from the first time she heard his music. She always struggled with self-confidence issues, But when she heard his songs, she opened up and became the super sexy woman I knew she was. I tried not to be jealous. I knew the chances of her getting together with him were slim to none, and she loved me. That still didn't change the fact that she wrote about him in her journal and would leave me in the midst of an argument to listen to him. I knew I was replaced by AP whenever she felt it was necessary, but I didn't think it was any different than how I found peace in the music I loved. On the way to the concert, my girlfriend would not contain herself. She was dressed super hot, and it seemed like her personal goal to grab AP's attention no matter what it took. She took selfies with me, but I could tell I was not important at this time. When he was introduced on stage, a tear came down her face. We were as close as anyone could get, right in front of the walkway, where he'd come out to sing and be close to his fans. When he saw my girlfriend, he couldn't stop looking. He was good at sharing his attention and staying focused, but as he sang, he kept looking back at her and touching her hand. She was in heaven. During one of the last songs, he held her hand again and must have given some kind of signal to someone that this was the girl he wanted. Not even 4 seconds later, he was singing somewhere else while she was given a backstage pass by security. Obviously, I could not believe this was not happening. I grabbed her hand and tried to leave, but she refused to come with me. She said this was the most exciting thing to ever happen to her, and she wasn't going to turn him down. My mouth was gaping. I asked her if she was leaving me for him because I knew if she was going back there alone, she was going to have sex with him. She said I didn't have to be like that, but I told her I wasn't playing games. If she slept with him, I wasn't going to forgive her as couples talk about. She easily picked him and turned back to watch the rest of the show. I stood there like a moron as people left for the parking lot. She was called back after a few minutes and didn't even turn to say goodbye. I then left the venue without her and made the 2-hour trip home. She called me 1 week later, sobbing. Out of curiosity, I listened to her story, but I told her we were done and there was no way she was getting a second chance from me. She said she was taken to AP's hotel room. They hung out for a long time, drank, and did drugs. Before they had sex, she was given a paper to sign that legally obligated her to never speak of this encounter with anyone, not even if there were undesirable consequences from this decision. Of course, he'd have to have some legal protection. If he was going to go around stealing people's significant others in a dream-come-true one-night stand. I basically laughed at my ex. I told her she made her choice. She cried harder and continued the story that she got to have a luxurious breakfast the next morning before AP's handlers returned her to her parents' house. She didn't want to tell them our house because she knew I was mad. Her parents quizzed her about what was going on and why she had locked herself in her old bedroom for a few days. She couldn't bring herself to tell them she cheated on me with a celebrity and was going to be alone now. Upon hearing that, I hung up on her and called her parents. I could hear her yelling in the background as I told them what happened. They kicked her out and called her several names. She was wailing as she packed her bags and complained about having nowhere to go. She was pretty much homeless now. They told her she should have thought about that before spreading her legs for someone who didn't care about her. It was a sweet piece of revenge for me to hear that. Then, things got even worse for her. She found out she was pregnant. As far as I know, she managed to find some sucker to live with and help raise the offspring, but the baby might have been put up for adoption. So that's how my ex-girlfriend completely screwed up her own life by having a one-night stand with someone she fantasized about. She never even wanted to have kids, but then because of her stupid self, she had a child by someone that she never saw again. Wow, OP, you've been through quite the ordeal. There you were, being kind and sweet to your significant other by getting her concert tickets to her favorite artist, only for her to betray you and literally break up with you that very night. It doesn't matter who AP was, your girlfriend was definitely in the wrong. She was a naive woman who chose to give up everything for what she thought was her greatest fantasy. All it turned out to be was the start of her destruction and unstable life. I'm proud of you for sticking to your gut and refusing to stay with this woman. I know it must have been hard, and you probably considered just letting it go so you could continue on the expected path, but you did the right thing by refusing that. The only way to have a genuine relationship full of unconditional love is to commit yourself to only that person. Relationship issues aside, infidelity is not the answer. She needed to get her priorities straight and learn who she wanted to become. Thank you for sharing your story. Now let's get into our second story for today. My wife, 27, and I 29. We're living in a small apartment complex where 2 times a year a bug man would come spray the apartment. It only took a few seconds and then they were gone, but we were still anxious about it. We'd make sure the apartment was clean, and one of the cats we owned was at her uncle's house. I don't like having people in my space, and my wife often said I had OCD. If things didn't go exactly according to plan, I would freak out. My wife was pretty understanding about that, at least, so she tried to stick to her word and give me a sense of stability while I did the same for her. On the morning the bug people were scheduled to come, I woke up in a panic at 5 a.m. I couldn't go back to sleep knowing a stranger would be arriving at my house soon, and I had to let him in. My wife woke up at 7 and started our usual chores and breakfast. After I ate with her, I worked on the computer for a few hours, and it was already 12 p.m., past the bugman's arrival window. Thinking he wouldn't be there that day, I finally started to relax. I felt my eyelids droop, so I decided to lie down on the couch. I must have gone into a very deep sleep because I didn't wake up until 5 p.m. My wife told me the bugman had stopped by while I was sleeping. This made me feel odd. I asked her how long he took to do it and why she didn't wake me up. My wife looked happy but shy, like she didn't want to talk about this. She said he was only in for a few minutes. They didn't say much, and she didn't want to wake me up because I was sleeping so well. Knowing my wife, that response was vague. Usually, she was very specific and good with words. I just know if she didn't have anything to hide, she would have specified precisely how long he was in the house and what they said to each other, if anything. I didn't know what I could do besides believe her. I checked out our bedroom, but there was nothing out of the ordinary. I realized at this point I was probably extra worried about this because my wife cheated on me in the past when we were dating. She says she thought we were on a break, but we weren't, really. I took out the trash and breathed in the fresh air for a minute to calm down when I saw a folded note beside our apartment door. It read, "To whoever is snoring on the couch in this apartment right now, I know my bug-spraying coworker went into your apartment and spent hours with your wife. You'll have to get her to admit what she did with him. Signed, a concerned fellow." I could not believe it. I took the note to my wife in a daze. Without saying a word, I wanted her to tell me what it meant. She was really caught off guard. I think she was in happy la la land believing she got away with cheating on me again as I napped in her living room. I think she took pride in thinking she was so clever. When I showed her the note, it was like she was slapped across the face. She said she didn't think it was that long. I waited for her to say more, but nothing came. I asked her if she slept with the man, and she turned bright red. I started losing it, and she couldn't calm me down because she knew she was caught, and I wouldn't believe any lie. She was right. I told her to get out. I didn't even wait for her to pack. I just started shoveling things into the hallway of the complex. At least she knew it was safe from bugs. She started panicking for no reason other than her future was uncertain. She didn't care that she broke my heart. She just needed to figure out who she could sucker into giving her a new place to live. While she made her phone calls, I kept shoveling until I was sure the apartment didn't have anything that belonged to her. I pushed her out to stand in the hallway with her phone charger still swinging from her phone. I heard commotion when 2 of her relatives arrived. At first, I could tell they were mad at me, banging on the door, but since I wouldn't answer, they turned their attention to her, and she told them what happened. They said she was lucky they loved her because what she just did was a terrible, terrible thing to do to someone. They made her wait for them to write me apology notes and slide money under the door, despite her objections, even though she should have been the one doing it. I don't know how long she stayed with them or where she ended up after this, but I know she had to face the reality that day she thought she was going to get away with cheating. After she left, I didn't want to rush into a new relationship, so I bought a puppy. He is my love and support until I try to tame a new woman. OP, I am sorry your relationship with your wife continued after the first time she cheated on you. I know for a fact that she started to believe you were gullible and she could get away with it again. Please don't let this immature and irresponsible woman turn you away from dating completely. Take the time you need to heal and know for sure what you're looking for in your partner. Learn how you communicate with people and what your weaknesses are so you're better equipped to deal with an entirely different person. Stay grounded and reasonable to help your partner and yourself through obstacles or problems while avoiding any unnecessary drama or selfish arguments. I know you're going to make it through this. You made the hard choice to leave her, and it was the right thing to do. You can and will find a better spouse as long as you know who you are and what you want out of life. Thank you for sharing your story. I wish you the best of luck. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate. I, 23 male, just leased my first apartment with my girlfriend, 22 female, of 2 years. We were only living there for a month before I found evidence of her affair. She let me know while we were dating that she was pretty sure she was bi. I shrugged it off. That was fine, right? As long as she knew what it meant to be in a committed and loyal one-on-one relationship. I asked to make sure she was only exclusively seeing me after 4 months into our relationship, and she said yes. She would message her friends all the time, but promised me she took our relationship seriously. Fast forward a year and a half, and we're very much in love and getting our first apartment together. A signed lease with each other. I was a little nervous, but I thought that was normal. We were together so often, and we'd be living together. There's no way she could have something going on behind my back. I was kinda wrong because she got away with something for a month. One morning, as I got ready for work, I found long blonde hair in our bed. Since I had short black hair and she had curly brown hair, I was pretty certain qualified as evidence of an affair. I showed it to her and asked if she had someone else in our bed. She shrugged and asked what I'd do about it if she did. I was speechless, and she added that if I was cool about it, maybe I could join them. I said I would end the relationship immediately because I wouldn't stand for being cheated on. She said we just signed the lease together, so I have to suck it up and appreciate what I had. I told her she was a psycho for thinking I was okay with this, and I paid a visit to the leasing office. The landlord was very empathetic and outraged at my story. She wrote me a letter that rescinded the lease. My ex was furious and started screaming and throwing stuff around. She wouldn't be able to lease the apartment without me because she still didn't have a job. I asked her why she couldn't just move in with AP, and she said it was none of my business. I didn't care. At least I knew she couldn't have a place to bring her back to. The landlord had another rental available, and she let me rent for cheap to help me cope with an unexpected life change. So my ex tried reaching me for a month until she finally gave up. I know she hates me even though she's a heartless cheater. She didn't have the maturity to rent a home with someone, and I wish I would have been able to tell her that. Living with someone requires selflessness, understanding, and responsibility. She acted like living with someone only meant they had to help her pay the bills, no matter how badly she treated them. That's selfish and controlling behavior if I ever saw it. I became a house party host, which is something I never would have thought to do before, in fear of my fiancé going out of her way to flirt with other people. I'm enjoying my freedom and certainly hope others don't fall for someone as disrespectful as this girl. OP, I am so glad you were able to get the lease rescinded on the grounds of her infidelity. I can't believe she had the nerve to act like what she did wasn't despicable. Any woman out there listening, I hope you never behave like this woman. She thought the world and her fiancé owed her something when she was only proving what a terrible spouse she was. She was far from the selfless, respectable, and supportive woman that men need as their wives. I think if she would have spent more time getting to know herself before dating or committing herself to a serious relationship, she could have figured out more for certain who she would want to be with for the long haul. Or even if being in a long-term committed relationship was for her. If it wasn't, of course, she would need to find an honest way to provide for herself and maintain her independence instead of roping in someone to help her pay the bills. Thank you for sharing this story. I have faith you're going to be okay, because you knew you had to dump her and got away from her quickly. Anyways, let's now get into today's second story. My wife, 38, and I, 40, celebrated our 8-year wedding anniversary. That was the last fond memory I have of us, because after that I became aware of her secret relationship. I wasn't very fond of social media or people, so I didn't have any accounts like that. I know it might be hard to believe. If it makes you feel better, I made one for the purpose of investigating my wife's activities. I got an email the week after our 8-year wedding anniversary that confirmed my wife's decision to move her phone number from our phone plan to AP's. It named the account her line was added to, which included AP's name. My vision started spinning. I joined Facebook and looked up his profile. It turned out he just celebrated a 2-year dating anniversary with my wife. I could not believe what I was looking at. It was like an alternate reality, where my wife never met me. She had all this time and trust, without me watching her, to leave our home and live a second life with this guy. I felt betrayed and worthless. I took screenshots of the profile and the confirmation email. I presented these to my wife when she arrived home from her sister's, so she said. It was hard for her to speak because the proof was right in front of her. She was dating another man for 2 years, bragging about it on Facebook and convincing her family that he was the same man she told them she married. We just had an on-again, off-again relationship. It made no sense. She started sobbing and told me she seriously regretted it, but he was helping her pay back student loans and improve her credit, which would ultimately help us. I told her that didn't make up for her sleeping with him. I was screaming at this point. Almost 10 years of my life was wasted on her. She told me it was purely a business scheme to her, and she only considered him a friend. She said it wasn't her fault he took her so seriously and pronounced their love on Facebook. I told her she was blind and stupid if she couldn't admit she was taking advantage of this man and me. She was only looking out for herself and didn't care how either of us would feel if we knew the other existed. She looked ashamed, but she just asked me if this meant she had to leave. I told her to get out and called her a cheating pile of dirt. So she left, but she only walked the 20-minute walk to her dad's house. She didn't take her car, which sat in the driveway parked behind my car in the garage. She took her car keys and 2 bags of belongings with her. I tried calling her the next day when I realized she didn't drive, but had her keys, and she didn't answer. I tried over and over, but she only texted with, "You couldn't forgive me. So now you have to live without me, no matter how hard it is." I only replied by asking why she left her car in my driveway. This is when it dawned on me that I hadn't contacted AP, even though I most definitely could. My wife was probably getting rides around town from him, and she just wanted me to be inconvenienced and slower to leave her because I couldn't drive anywhere. Well, I fixed that really quickly. I sent him proof of our marriage, anniversary date, and everything, and waited for things to happen. He freaked out and asked me if he could come to talk to me. I agreed. He came to my house, and we spoke in the front yard. He said he was supposed to go get her from her dad's that very night, but he had no idea she was married. I told him he could have her if he wanted, but yes, she was a cheater, and she would probably cheat on him too, as soon as she got bored or felt like getting new attention. I pointed out her car parked behind mine, and he freaked out again. She was caught in another lie. He said she told him her car was being fixed, and she needed $1,000 for him for repairs. My jaw dropped. She was lying to him for money. I don't know why I was as surprised as I was. So, AP helped me jack up her car and move it to a no-parking zone. Then we coasted her. She was stuck at her dad's house with no response from either of us. She finally walked to my house to find that her car was missing, and she couldn't get inside because I took back her key. She banged on the door and cried. She yelled out questions like why wouldn't I answer her, where was her car, why was this happening, and other things. I thought about calling the police, but her dad came by and told her to get in his car. She did, reluctantly. She eventually found her car in the possession of a towing company. She had to pay a ton of money to get it back, and her dad made her get a job at McDonald's to learn something about privilege and respect. She isn't happy, but I am relieved. The divorce was easy, which was great because I was already going through enough emotionally. I know she has no dating life with her dad hovering over her, and on a part-time McDonald's income at 38 years old. I'm hoping men are spared the fate of courting her. Wow, OP. You had to go through a spouse's worst nightmare. Discovering out of the blue after an anniversary that your spouse has been seeing someone else for the past 2 years is terrifying. I wish I could have spared you this reality, but thank you for sharing what happened, in hopes that it could spare someone else heartbreak. Let this be a lesson to everyone not to start a side relationship under the assumption that you won't be caught, or deserve help paying debt, or deserve more attention, or whatever other unfair reason an immature person would give for cheating. The truth always comes out, and chances are, if you're the one cheating, there will be hard consequences to face. When your world crumbles apart the moment your affair is exposed, you'll wish you could take it back or have a second chance. If your spouse is smart, they won't give you a second chance at keeping them. If the relationship is bad, of course, there's therapy and communication as a remedy. If all else fails, end the relationship before starting a new one. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. I started coming over to see her while she lived at her mother's house. I had to visit while her mom was at work because she never wanted anyone to visit my wife. We played games with the kids and went to the neighborhood pool a few times. After about 4 months of daily visits, and even some sleepovers with the kids at my house, her mother changed the locks of her house while they stayed over. She thought that since her daughter trusted me enough to bring the kids to my house, we knew each other well enough for her to move in. I'm sure it had nothing to do with the fact that she just wanted to unload her daughter on someone else because she herself was engaged to be married. We had a great 2 months of living together until we found out from the landlord that there wasn't enough space for 3 children. I immediately started looking for new housing for my new family of 5. We searched for a while, but couldn't find any houses that fit our budget. So I agreed to move in with her father several states away. I was scared to move away from everything I knew for the past 10 years for a woman I didn't know. I should have kicked her out right then, but I decided she was worth taking the leap for. I was used to being married and committed to someone. I wanted children, and I cared for the 3 of them. That's why I came home from work and found out that she was still talking to her youngest father. She swore that it was about visiting the child only, nothing between them, but she was planning to meet him so he could at least say goodbye to his child if we were moving so far away. She asked if we were moving like she wasn't even sure it was happening, despite all the packing and boxes in my house. She was on her phone more than usual, and I just knew this was more than what she was saying. We got into a fight about it, so she left with the kids for a while. I went out drinking, and I wondered if this was the right thing to do. I got home late, and she still wasn't back. I started to worry because I really did care about her, and I was never a father, but I could imagine a dad should have every right to say goodbye to his child. I was more worried that there was more going on between my new girlfriend, who I was risking everything I had for, and the kid's father. My worries were becoming more real when she didn't come home until the next morning. It was very strange because she didn't get back until I was at work, one of the last days before moving. When I got home, she acted like everything was fine, and it was such a relief to see me. It was a relief to see her too because I got used to her presence. Everything was good until we laid down in bed together. Then her heart was pounding so loud I could hear it. I asked her what was going on, and she broke down. She said she slept with her kid's father again. I jumped out of bed and started screaming. I knew this was going to happen. This was why I didn't want her to go, and we had a fight about it. It was 12 a.m. when they went back to her mom's house, but she wouldn't let them in. So I bought her a hotel room for her and the kids before they drove 10 hours the next day. She called me so many times, begging me to answer the phone and give her another chance. She said she loved me and never meant to sleep with him. She knew it was the last and only time she was ever going to sleep with another man besides me. I told her she was wrong because I would never have her again. I have no idea where she is today, but I know I lucked out. I was willing to give her my heart and provide for her and her children, but it wasn't enough for her to remain loyal to me and respect my wishes. I believe I'll find a woman that knows how to turn down a man's advances out of love and dedication to me. OP, I am so sorry this woman betrayed your kindness, generosity, and commitment for one more night with her ex. It shows how immature and mindless she was for failing to think of you, or her kids, or any of the consequences of it. It sounds like her mother was heartless but familiar with her daughter's poor decision-making. Having 3 kids and an abusive marriage should have caused your ex to think through the long-term effects of her actions. She should have put herself last with her children and you coming first. Sometimes we all have to go through massive tragic mistakes to realize what we need to work on to better ourselves. We might not ever have the answers to our hardest questions until we suffer. The hardest thing to learn is probably that you don't matter very much. Whatever you project or do is what matters, so focus on making that worthy and positive. No one should have to have many bad experiences with people. Anyways, that's enough for this story. Let's now get into our second story for today. I was a single father living with my elderly mother. My girlfriend left me and our child to find herself. She enrolled in a school out of state and lived with a roommate. She didn't really give me any indication that we'd be getting back together in the future. She did say she'd want to be in her son's life, but that would be later. I was shocked and basically begged her not to leave or do this. I asked her if she could do classes online, but she said it was the freedom and experience she needed in addition to the knowledge. 2 years after she left, I'd been with several women that never met my son. I wouldn't have them at my house. Instead, I had my sister come over to babysit. She felt bad enough that my ex abandoned us. Well, at least for a while. I was at work when I got a phone call that made my stomach flop. I stepped outside to answer it, and of course it was my ex. She said she graduated and was moving back to our town. She said she knew it had been a while, so she didn't expect me to let her back into our lives easily, but she made it clear that she intended to win back my heart. I'll admit I was pretty happy. I thought the ordeal was over, and we could have the life I thought we would. As soon as she got back, she had me over at her new place, and we made a nice reunion out of it. I went home on cloud nine and started dreaming about her reuniting with our son. It happened sooner than it should have. Just a week after she got back, she saw him again. I wanted her back in our lives and I wanted her back in our house, but she said she wanted me to come over at least one more time before she started packing up. She added that she had something to tell me, but thought it would be better in person. I was nervous at this point because I knew I let her back in my heart too fast. I started assuming the worst. When I got there, she introduced her male friend roommate to me. Before I could even react to the fact she was living with some guy while I was sleeping with her, she started kissing him in front of me. I started yelling no and tried to turn around and leave, but they both grabbed me and made me sit on the couch. I was obviously terrified. I stayed still and pretended I would hear them out. She explained that since she found herself in college, and that she needed me to at least consider the possibility of sharing her with AP. She said the idea excited her, and this was a way we could keep the relationship alive. She added that I could have another woman too if I wanted. I thought of our son and felt so weird. I didn't want him to live in a house with his parents and their other lovers. This was never going to happen. I knew we were done because she was living and sleeping with this guy without telling me. She purposely tried to get me into something I would never have agreed to if she told me about it beforehand. As soon as there was enough space between me and them, I bolted out the door. She yelled after me and even tried to grab me, but I was gone. I got back to my boy and gave him a huge hug. I called the police to report how she held me there and threatened to drug me if I didn't stay. I filed for custody of our son that very same week, and 1 month later, because my wife and AP were already broken up, so she had no permanent address or place for him to live. The police report might have helped my case. I think it was pretty obvious that he should continue to live with me. Visitation was scheduled, but she doesn't always show up because it makes her mad that I'm ordered to be present and that I don't fall for her emotional tricks. Plus, every time she sees her son, she knows deep down that she messed up. I feel bad she's missing out on so much. Whenever she gets a job, child support will start coming out of her wages. I started dating again like I was before, but I've also made sure to start spending time with myself. I speak positively to myself and rest assured that when it's time for a woman to become a role model in my son's life, she will. OP, I am so sorry your girlfriend abandoned you and the child. It's hard to believe she would up and leave without giving you a hint at the future of your relationship, but she probably didn't want you to wait just in case she decided never to return. She did not deserve a second chance as your woman and the mother of your child, and she probably knew that, which is why she manipulated you into meeting her without telling you everything first. She wanted you to feel like everything was going to be fine now that she was back. It's a very tricky mind tactic. The fact that you unexpectedly lost her and expected a future together was another reason she was able to convince you so easily. She was willing to terrorize you to get her way, but you managed to get the heck out of there and never go back. You are a very wise and thoughtful man. You put your child's well-being above your own emotions, which is precisely what all parents should be doing. It takes an adult to realize that their emotions don't have to rule their actions. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me. I want to thank all of you again for your support. It truly means a lot